All right, so this second and last part of this last week is a focus on the idea of concept within the research, right? So hopefully one of the things that you have realized throughout this time is not only that research has these procedures, right, these things that we put in place to help you navigate and organize the collection of information that will give you some reliable data and reliable sources that you can then transform conceptually into ideas, into propositions, into action. Right? So all these are the kinds of things that we think about. How do we frame our study, the introduction, what is the issue, what is the problem, right? So why should we try something new, right? It's part of the problem. What is the purpose? What is it that I'm going to do and why? How am I going to narrow the kinds of things that I'm doing? How the research questions are going to go and give me some specific kind of ways of looking at a particular theme. Right? How do I look at the literature and all the context, all the kinds of works that people have done, and how do I help through that by selecting parts of that study, part of what has been done in in a context of, let's say, music education in general, or motivation, or methods books, or improvisation, whatever, right? And how I create a support system for my own research. How do I organize then the methods, right? Is it a case study? And if it is a case study, why is it a case study? If it's an action research, well, what are the kinds of things that I'm going to do that are connected to action research? Participation with my students, a particular kind of participant in observations, journaling, right? The procedures, how I'm going to collect information. The kinds of ideas. Why am I doing a phenomenology? Well, because I want to have a closer interaction with perceptions and how people are thinking about issues. Why do I do an ethnography? Well, because I want to know more about this context, about the environment. Right? All those are obviously connected to ways of thinking, right? Including the process of now collecting and organizing and then analyzing data, right? I'm coding things. I put things in particular boxes and categories because I'm able to see those boxes and categories, because I'm able to imagine those boxes and categories, right? I name them as something. I see students behaving in a particular way, and I say, oh, this is peer learning, or oh, this student is kind of scaffolding something, right? It's remembering something he learned, and he's trying to get organized this based on the experience he has had, right? Those are boxes for the themes and in my analysis that come out of a particular perception, a way of looking at the world. Right? So it's a conceptual idea that connects and links all this research together. If I am not able to think about those things, I'm not able to really do research. Particularly not qualitative research. And that's a really significant aspect of this whole process. So not only the procedural aspect, which we've been talking a lot about, but also the ethical aspects, which we talked earlier on this lesson, as well as the conceptual aspects are really significant, right? And this is what this is all about here. These are the links that you're going to see here, both in terms of videos, in terms of readings, right? There's two kind of competing ideas here, and Afi helped me and kind of organize some of this. It's an interest of hers, and we did that as part of a project, the internal project for this class. And what you see is, Plato, this old philosopher, Greek philosopher, looking at, there's some fabulous videos there and some linkages to not only the text itself, but also to the Matrix, the movie. If you are not seeing the Matrix, there's 3 movies, and they're just really fantastic, right? But they're really the whole organizational aspect, conceptual aspect of all these pieces is really about the worldview. It's really about how do we see, how do we perceive the world, and what are the kinds of limitations that we have, right? So the allegory of cave is, among many other things, is about what is it that we're able or not to see. What is it that we believe because we have heard, and how much of that has gone through the process of really reflecting and introspection, right? The process of bringing what's outside in the world of other people are saying into my own perception, and trying to then explore that also in terms of research through data, through formal, structural, systematic kind of investigation. It doesn't need to mean that this is huge, right? It means that we can do that every day in our classrooms as long as we figured out ways of this is the lens that I'm doing. This is the kinds of things that I'm thinking about, right? But this is something that is interesting to me and is bothering me, or that I heard about and I want to try out. Am I doing really the best I can with this? Or could students be learning slightly different? Is the modes and procedures that I have established for myself as teachers are the best possible ways? Could I re-articulate this? How do I change? How do I organize? How do I try something out? How do I risk something in a manner that is also constructive, right? Those are key issues and key preoccupations. They're a part of thinking conceptually, a part of this idea that Plato establishes and the Matrix establishes as well. This concern that sometimes we're doing the same thing over and over without giving it too much thought. And just because we have been doing something in a particular way, it does not mean that we should be doing that way. And it does not mean that some research, some process of systematic investigation might not help us to do that. In order to do that, we don't need to do big research again. We can do that in our classrooms. We can do that on a daily basis. We can do that with the skills that we have been developing, for instance, now. Right? All this leads also, and is also connected to this worldview that Plato establishes, is also something that Thomas Kuhn established in the late 60s and 70s, that based on a book that has become very, very famous, right? And this idea, the central idea of Kuhn's is the idea of what is a paradigm, right? And a paradigm is in many ways an organization of thought that has two levels. Right. One of them is connected very much to Plato and the allegory of Cave, which is the paradigm is a consensus. Right. A paradigm is something that is established. I think that's something, computers should have an interactive face to it. Well, this idea, if we all agree to that, has come to that point of agreement that by saying that a number of people agree, a number of people have organized their ideas to say, yeah, no, this should be so because X, Y, and Z, right? So we should say, people in, let's say, in Europe agree that while the penal system should punish individuals that, for instance, committed a heinous crime, they should not be put to death by the state, right? That's a paradigm. That's a way, it's a consensus that a particular group of people arrived, which is obviously there's a different penal paradigm in the U.S. than there is in Europe, for instance, on those terms, right? There's a paradigm about that has been in place in music education for a long time that is now changing, that the role of undergraduate music education programs should be to give students entry-level skills, right? Which means that they should be able to do all the didactic stuff that music educators do. Well, nowadays, because of the complexity of systems, because of new standards, because of issues like Common Core, because of interdisciplinary needs, the paradigm for what a music educator that graduates with an undergraduate music education is much more complex and has become much more centered on understanding cross-disciplinary work, having critical thinking at its basis, being able to be adaptable, understanding multiple pedagogies, right? So there's a new paradigm now. So that's very important. But again, there is two levels of that. A paradigm can be something that revolutionizes, a revolutionary element, moving us from something that we accept as true. For instance, in the 50s and 60s, the role of women was still very much connected to a paradigm that one person is the breadwinner in the house, usually the man, and the women therefore should have, and its role should be at the home. This has, since the 70s particularly, been revolutionized, obviously, and today that is an unconceivable in many places paradigm, right? So a dual working relationship, a dual established relationship between men and women at work, where the hierarchies ought to be the same, at least, is the new paradigm, regardless of how, for instance, women still make in average 20% less than men when they're doing the same job, right? So there's a different paradigm, certainly, that there was about gender relations in the 50s than it is today. I mean, it's very hard to say that there isn't, regardless of the remaining inequalities, right? But paradigms are really significant. And for instance, the paradigm for research in music education at one point was all about quantitative research, data, numbers, and if you look at journals in law in maybe 40 years ago, they're all the effects of replicating a particular method of how to play clarinet. Today, they're much more complex. They're much more connected to qualitative data. They're much more complex, connected to questions that ask why. Right? So questions that are interested in shifting and changing the ways in which we see education, curriculum, pedagogy, so forth and so on. So the paradigm changed. And the paradigm, again, can be a revolutionary paradigm, or it can be a paradigm that keeps people in a particular way in a particular space. Right? So they obviously can play those two roles, but it's really important for us to understand them and to think about what is the paradigm that I am working under. When I'm thinking about assessment, what kind of paradigm do I see? It's just minimum work is necessary. I use mostly summative, or do I foster growth over time? Do I engage in formative forms of thinking? When my paradigm is about mastery versus amateurism, what paradigm do I feel myself most comfortable with? Should music function in order to foster high talent, or should music function as a social engagement that is the right of every individual, and therefore the role of music education is to foster that? What is your paradigm? Right? So those are really significant elements that frame and shade, in many ways, how we ask questions, what we believe to be true, how do we tend to behave in particular situations, how do we respond to suggestions, to particular ways of doing, obviously, then how do we act within our own classroom. So this is a complex issue, but it's really important, and it's really a befitting way to end the semester. It's thinking about this kind of big picture again. Thinking about what is the paradigm that we have been working under, and what are the kinds of things that we're willing to risk and change and really evaluate, and how obviously research can help us to do that in a somewhat systematic way, so that what we think we're looking at, what we think we're doing, what we think is true can be evaluated in more, not simply objective terms, but in more complex terms, in serious terms. So I hope that's a good way to to end with these kind of big pictures in mind, these kind of big questions in our heads going into the summer, and thinking about how they might impact the day-to-day practices in our classrooms. All right. Hopefully, it was lovely having you over the summer, over the semester with this class. We're looking at the summer coming up. I'm looking forward to seeing your projects as well next Wednesday. Okay. See you later.